Good morning. If you get disoriented, you can look in the rear. It's on the spec screen back there also. My name's Charles Blach. I'm a retired deputy fire chief from New York City. I was intimately involved with the 9/11 operations, starting on 9/11. I'm also a retired Marine colonel, active in reserve. And when I left the fire department in '04, I actually was recruited by Raytheon, so if you want a good deal on missiles, I can give you a good deal on missiles. So I've been around the whole horn and seen a lot of things, and I wanted to try to keep this in your memory, what actually occurred on 9/11. A lot of the folks here, I assume some were not even born on 9/11. Well, maybe a few were, but at any rate. I had two sons. One was in high school and one was beginning his first year in college when this happened. So before I start, just to tell you, the fire department of New York was never much for getting help from anybody. We were talking about that earlier in the day with some folks, is that incident command was not a word we ever heard of before. We ran our fires, we ran whatever we had to do. I mean, I will just briefly mention what our assets were prior to 9/11 or on the morning of 9/11. There were 197 engine companies, 143 ladder companies, 5 rescue companies, 8 squad companies, 3 Marine units to the fireboats, and 1 hazmat unit. That's quite a bit of equipment. So we could transmit multiple alarms throughout the city and get all the help we ever needed. So now we're going to move into, the only other point I would mention, tours traditionally change at 9 in the morning, 09, and at 1800, 6 p.m. at night. Most folks work 24 hours. They shift a tour with somebody. So this incident developed prior to 0900 on the 11th. So what happened was everyone heard what was going on. Double crews responded. That's why we had such a significant loss of life.
I think our microphone cut out on us. This microphone, I think it cut out.
Is it on?
I think it turned off on us.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Did I have to repeat anything, or did you hear everything I said before? It's okay. So I'm only speaking from the perspective of the New York City Fire Department. There are other things occurred, other people did things, wonderful things I became aware of later. This is the presentation I have at this point. Oh, wrong button. All right. So this is just a general description of what the towers actually were. 110 stories, that's pretty high. And you could get 50,000 people in there if you catch them on the right time. I will share this story with you. When I was a beginning firefighter over in Brooklyn, they sent us for orientation on these buildings. They were coming up, they were new construction, et cetera, et cetera. And we took the elevators to the roof of one of the towers. I don't remember which one or two. The elevators go so fast and the building actually shakes, so these elevators do one of these on the way up. And I remember a construction worker up there, he was talking, and I figured he was just blowing steam out of his head, but he said, these things are designed, if they're going to collapse, they're going straight down. And I said, yeah, right, okay, 110 stories are going to collapse, it's going to go straight down. I should have paid attention to him. Any rate, the Twin Towers were the site of a prior attack in '93, February of '93. There was a bombing in the garage underneath the Vista Hotel. It blew out support columns, et cetera, et cetera. This is significant in our current event here because what the Port Authority did was reinforce the hotel beyond belief. So when we went post 9/11 and started trying to dig through the debris, we couldn't move this stuff. We finally got the engineers from the Port Authority to, oh yeah, we reinforced everything. You're going to have to really go up there and blow it apart.
Chief, can I see the microphone one more time? It turned off again. I think the batteries are
Why
dead.
is it go? Oh. I'll speak louder then until he gets the batteries up. So one of the interesting construction features with these is something called the slurry walls. These buildings are built in a bathtub. It's landfill. The Hudson River seeps into it all the time. So there was a huge construction project to build a bathtub around this whole thing. This will be significant later. I'll point out to you some of the things I had to run around with, worrying about this thing filling up with water while we're trying to rescue. Well, we thought we were rescuing people. We're back on the air, okay. One of the other unique features of this construction is it's center core construction. Everything is in the center, then it branches out to the windows. So all the support, all the exit stairs, everything is in that center core. Once you lose the center core, there is no escape from this building. The Port Authority was not subject to any building code in New York City. It was a standalone entity. So when the first bombing occurred in '93, we suddenly became aware there were no sprinklers in the building. There were no stair rails in the stairways. There was no emergency lighting, et cetera, et cetera. So these things were corrected by the time 9/11 came around, but an eye-opener. I have to figure out which button to push here. Okay. So this is just a general description of the plane. You're all Air Force folks, or on Air Force bases, you know. I have no idea what you do with 10,000 gallons worth of fuel. And these planes have just been filled up, have just gone in, and that's the time hack for this thing. If you'll notice, the North Tower got struck at 0848, 0903, the South Tower, 0959, the South Tower collapsed first. It had to do with where the fuel spread, what it got to before the North Tower was doing the same thing. The North Tower was when you saw a lot of the photos of people jumping down because they were there for such a long period of time. The South Tower got hit and basically collapsed.
You were looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
The plane was coming in. I noticed it a second before it hit the building. It looked like it was moving slowly, and it lined itself up to hit the building directly.
The doorman goes to me, "Oh, I never seen a plane flying so low." And we looked out at it, all of a sudden, boom, it seemed like it wasn't even real.
I said the whole takes about, looks like 6, 7 floors were taken out. And
We got an explosion inside.
the building exploded. People running up the street.
So that first picture there where the firefighters are expressing their surprise at what's going on, there was a team of French photographers that had gotten permission to ride with the 1st Battalion and record everyday operations. They were at a minor gas leak in the street when this whole thing occurred, and that's how they captured it. These are the poor folks that this not only ended their poor lives, it ended a few firefighters' lives on the bottom trying to hook up hoses. We never really got a real accurate count of what was going on. The traditional operation of a fire department at these things is to hook up hoses to the standpipe system to supply extra water. That became impossible with all the bodies coming down. Some of the people that are actually there in the command post, in the lobby, said that the fall of the bodies was deafening. There goes the South Tower. And that white stuff, whatever it is, I mean, that's the stuff that caused all the lung problems, and it was everything you could imagine. As I said, I became the logistics chief later on, And I would spend my days running around yelling at people, put masks on, put masks on. They'd put them on while I was there, then they'd take them off. And that stuff was, no one ever really knew what it was. It's just very caustic, and it just lasted forever. It was in the air, and the way the wind was blowing, it blew from the northwest to the southeast. So all the people on the southeast side of the operations really got hit hard. This is a juxtaposition of, that's the 93 explosion. That's the 9/11 explosion. You can see in 93 it was basically contained to the building. No one really knew what was going on until, there were also, police agencies were saying it was a gas explosion, but no gas explosion I ever saw took out that many columns of a building. But at any rate.
Over an hour. I want to underscore again that both towers have been hit. Both towers, each tower was hit by an aircraft, incoming aircraft. The origin of the aircraft, what kind of planes.
So this is all being broadcast to the world at the same time. I'll show you. This is sort of what, this is a little later on into the operations, but this is what you were faced. If you were the on-scene commander, the incident commander, you could scratch your head and say, now what do I do? I know there used to be in the Marine Corps, whenever in OCS, you would always say, now what are you going to do, Lieutenant? Well, there it is. The staff, basically the fire department staff had been wiped out. There were 1 or 2 assistant chiefs left, and the rest deputy chiefs, those of us who survived, assumed command. That's a typical, that's actually ladder 3 there, which is in the museum.
There have been frantic efforts to get people out of the tower. This is tape, and you can see now whether that was an explosion or exactly what happened that caused that second tower to collapse. We cannot tell you. CNN's Kelly Wallace is on the phone. There.
So the standard fire department response is no delay in alarm. I'm not quite sure we had to put that in here. There was no delay. The battalion chief was right there when the planes were being hit. Fifth alarm almost means absolutely nothing anymore. Almost half of the city fire department showed up at that point. So it's some units self-dispatched, others waited for calls to go down, but they were all coming in with double the manpower that's normally assigned to these things, the units. That was a toll as we knew it when we prepared these slides. We've had several hundred more die from complications of cancer. And I'll mention some of the other figures here. We had 343 firefighters, 287 have died since then. The Port Authority had 37 officers. The World Trade Center as a total had 2,753 people killed. The Pentagon had 184. And in Pennsylvania, when that plane went down, 40 people were found dead. And the fire department, they had 200 units destroyed, over half the fire department. 130 were damaged, and they estimated a cost at that time of $21 million or whatever. So that's where we start to fall into, now what do you do after you've inherited this mess? This is what it looked like. You couldn't walk in there. This is all steel and walking up and down, and some of the steel is as hot as anything. You're walking on it. We're going in there with our fire boots, the leather boots, and they're not doing well in this. One of the things we had to do later on was we had to get construction worker boots. We had to get construction worker garb, the brown coveralls and the jackets. I must have bought every one they had in the United States at that point, and then when the crews came in to work, we would give it to them. And then the battle began. They had to give it back to us because we wanted to clean it and give it to we had 2 or 3 sets to change.
New York late this afternoon, a third damaged building. The 40-story World Trade Center number 7 also crashes to the ground. And emergency.
So what's so interesting about this? This is the last building to go down. It's located on the north end of the World Trade Center complex, outside of the complex, but that's where Mayor Giuliani decided to put the Office of Emergency Management. And, you know, once again, the Blaiches get involved in controversy. My brother was the battalion chief down there. He issued a violation order because they put a 6,000-gallon fuel tank in the elevator lobby to supply the diesel generators for the Office of Emergency Management. I stood and watched the building. It burned. I don't care what anybody says. That was fuel oil burning there. The final report sort of danced around it, saying, well, it was hit by something, but take it for what you want. So we had to somehow figure out how we were going to handle this thing. New York City is great for running up fire operations that always end at 0900 or always end at 1800. You don't want to incur overtime. We have to make sure these things go out. So this was a whole new ball game for us, a whole new ball game. So what shows up at our doorstep is something called the Incident Management Team from the federal government. The first group I always called the Forest Rangers or the Tree People, because they were the Incident Management Team from the wildfires out west. And they knew how to set this stuff up. The first thing I did with them was find out whom they were bringing in. They brought in a lot of operational people to us. I don't need any operation people. I need your finance people, how to manage this thing, how to do different and also your credit card. They had a great credit card. This is not at the scene. These are the command boards that were set up at each lobby of the trade centers. This is how we, at that point, kept track of who was whom. When units came in, the officer running the board would pull their tab. This had the whole city of New York listed on. They would pull their tab, put it on a map, put it on a hand-drawn map, possibly. Each division had a minor one of these, a smaller one made up, which had all the division units in it. So they were completely destroyed, so nobody knew who was where. Later on in my life, I worked with Raytheon, and we actually developed electronic command boards that would track this stuff. And we were probably ahead of our time, as sometimes things are, because the communications backbone of the city didn't support it at that point. They've now adapted other things. They've got the whole program on laptops. They open up, the chiefs look at it, and the whole thing is displayed very accurately. But at that point, we were developing boards that big. This is something you're all familiar with because you know incident command and incident management. And this was new to us. A lot of it was. We've never had a logistics section in our life. I got hauled into headquarters and said, "You're the logistics chief." And I said, "Why?" "Well, you were in the Marine Corps." I said, "What's that got to do with it?" I said, "The last battalion commander I had to stay out of logistics. It's not career enhancing." But there we are. This is yours truly in here. I don't know if you can see it, but 2 stories here. That's my father's old leather helmet. I was home at the time. I grabbed the helmet from a basement and went out. My brother picked me up. He was off also. We took the Staten Island ferry across, and as the first building went down, my brother figured he lost his son, and then we proceeded in. And this is an interesting thing where you talk about coordinating activities. The police are on the ferry boat too with all their police cars, and the ferry captain is worried about docking this boat. He could see the terminal was all covered in ash, smoke, couldn't see anything. He wanted, so we should bring the ferry boat up to 30th Street and offload everybody there. And the police captain said, "No, you got to land down here. I got to get my police car." "Put your gun away, Cap. We'll make it work." And eventually we did land. And then fast forward 5 years later, I'm giving a talk, and fortunately I didn't say anything derogatory about the police officer because he was in the audience. I was the police. Okay, good, wonderful. So the other quick thing is, what am I holding in my hand there? When I walked up, I came up on the west side of town after I got off the boat. My brother was on the boat. Well, he took after people on the other side. That's why he got hit so badly with the fumes, with the debris and stuff. His lungs are shot. I went up on the west side, and contractors were there opening up their Connex boxes and giving us tools. I don't know when the last time you saw a contractor give you a tool, but they were giving us tools and picks and axes and whatever. And then I bumped into one of our field communications unit, and they gave me radios. And they told me, by the way, there's an officer trapped underneath here. We told them you're on the way to rescue him. You know, you saw what this debris looks like. But fortunately, they did get the fellow out. The map, that's the blueprints for the entire World Trade Center. The building engineer came running up to me. I have no idea what he was doing on West Street. He said, Chief, here's a map, the blueprints of all the entire building. So naturally, I threw away 99% of it. That building's gone. But what I was trying to find here is there are subterranean parking lots. We were hoping to find people in this, if we could find our way into it. There were ramps that went down. We eventually went into it by, that's the Vista Hotel behind us there. I don't know what they changed the name to. But we went into that, went down the elevator shafts to search the cars. And there was nobody. In fact, the Vista Hotel was still set up with tables and glasses. Hadn't even bothered it. And the other thing was, the engineer said, you've got to get down to the river and shut the valves to the slurry wall, to the walls. What had happened was there were constant pumps going on, pumping water out of the, we'll call it the bathtub. Now that the pumps were not working, he was worried that the water would start to come in big time. So I said, all right, I found a couple lieutenants from a couple of companies and sent them down with tools to break into the valves and start shutting all this stuff down. And then the last thing that happened, a man, sort of a fireman's uniform, more like a marine engineer. You know, the fireboats had engineers. They were firemen, but they wore dark uniforms because they were working with oil and everything else. And Chief, the Harvey's ready to pump. The Harvey was a fireboat we got rid of decades ago. I don't know what it was doing there, but a bunch of fire buffs had bought it and were keeping it up. I said, we don't have a Harvey. We're there. We don't have any fuel and we don't have any hose. So I we shook the Office of Emergency Management rep there. He had a satellite phone, and we were able to get a fuel barge from Port Authority to fill up the Harvey. And hose, I had lots of hose. That was our water supply for the next 4 days because all the hydrants were wiped out on West Street. And then we had another fireboat come up, Marine One came up, and they supplied a little bit further south. But it's amazing what you can do. These are things you've all studied here. I won't belabor them, but these are things that you know about, and we, the New York City Fire Department, now has adopted them. I mean, we have incident commanders, and we have logistics chiefs, and we have everything. And we were doing it sort of, now we have a uniform terminology. We can interface with everybody. This is the basic plan of what it looks like, the World Trade Center. That's Tower 7. That's from my command post. I came up the street. Right about there, I bumped into Dr. Persant, who's actually the lung specialist in the fire department. He looked like a shake and bake chicken, the poor guy. And he said, get masks. And he just pointed, it's a whole row of abandoned ambulances. We just opened the doors and took every mask we could get, give them to anyone that could wear them. He said, just wear a mask. Probably saved a lot of people's lungs. And then how do we establish these 4 areas became the 4 operational points for the entire operation for the next 5 months. Contracts were awarded to demolition crews based on that. How do we do that? I shouted up to here till this guy on this side couldn't see anymore, so we made, all right, that's the dividing point there. They did the same thing. So we established how far could you see over the rubble. That became the dividing factor. This gives you a little more in-depth view of what actually was going on with the buildings. That's what actually collapsed. Now, if you notice on the side I showed you pictures, there wasn't a lot of fire. The fire was on the Church Street side. There were buildings burning over there, one of which was the Treasury building that had the vault in the bottom loaded with gold and silver. That was another operation. I didn't necessarily get involved with it, but it's nice to know. The Treasury had all their gold and silver in this vault buried there, and now they had to figure out how to get it out of there. So one night, it looked like 99% of the New York Police Department and Secret Service and everybody could carry a gun lined from the World Trade Center up over the Brooklyn Bridge to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and they just hauled all the gold and silver out of there. I did learn a few things. gold weighs so much and silver weighs so much, and you can only put so much in these trucks. So much silver, so much gold, and it was very interesting. You know, the police were very fearful that someone was going to knock off these trucks. We're talking about convoys of gold and silver being hauled out of there. So we had support from everybody. These are teams that are formed throughout the United States, search and rescue teams. New York has one, there's one down in Virginia. Very, very helpful. We also had the Mexican USAR show up, the Japanese. They were great people. When I thanked them and asked them to leave, they just moved around to another corner where I wasn't watching them. They were tough. And it was same with volunteer from fire departments all over the country were there. And you know, as the weeks went on, we wanted to try to get them out of there for their own safety. And also we had to start doing heavy duty, I'll call it deconstruction, or pulling everything apart. We still had to honor the fact that we were looking for remains of people, but human beings could not move some of the steel. I mean, just not to be macabre about it, but at one point I remember being down there. All these steel columns, these massive columns, were hollow inside. One day and they were always glowing red or this or that. We're pulling them up. There was a body inside it. What's the chances of a column coming down, cutting a man's arms and legs off, and trapping him in that mess? And then the steel, as we pulled it out, initially till I get a dock built to haul it by barge, we were hauling it by truck into something called the Battery Tunnel to Brooklyn, to Staten Island, to the landfill. These trucks all had limber boards on them, wooden limber boards. They kept going on fire every time we put this stuff in, so we had to build huge showers for the trucks. They'd drive in, we'd shower everything down, and then they'd drive on off through the tunnel. This was, we didn't really need an initiative. This was the mortuary. They were setting up all over the place, but we really didn't have any bodies to bring. Nor did we have the disaster, the medical disaster. We really didn't have many. Hospitals were setting up all over, but we really didn't have any need for that. I did mention the fact we were looking for my nephew. He was working that day in Engine 9, which is called a satellite unit. It holds a hose wagon of heavy hose to major alarms. They had heard the call. They had just gotten there and were going up in the tower, North Tower, when they told to get out. They started down. They couldn't get in the lobby, so they went down into the parking garage. The parking garage / service area for the World Trade Center was serviced by a quarter-mile road that went up to Barclay Street. So trucks, fire trucks, everything went down through there, and then they took the elevator up. So Peter, they went down, and when the South Tower went down, they dove underneath the cars. They came out of that, and they started walking up Barclay Street when the North Tower came down, and that rolled them out of Barclay Street like cannonballs. He's been since retired. He's got all sorts of stuff stuck in his lungs. They don't even know what to do with it. The USAR teams were there. We mentioned that already. Military. The military actually brought in a robot, which I was dying to try to use, and just when I had a mission for it, the first sergeant, "Oh, we got to go somewhere else," and was gone. That was they were on their way to Iraq, I think. Not Iraq, I guess we were going to the other great opposite. So every day, and this is a great help from the IMAT teams, they would prepare this the night before. We'd sit down, what are we going to do tomorrow? And we prepared detailed plan. We were really concerned, you know, later on we brought in these massive cranes, like one-of-a-kind cranes in the whole United States. And little did I know, you just can't drive these things around. You've got to make sure that they've got support underneath them. And don't forget, some of this is hollow ground. There's hollow in the sense it's open, and that there's garages underneath it. You got to make sure you're not going to cave. So we had to do detailed studies and make sure some people that were doing searches and rescue weren't crawling around when we were moving these things in. It was a very coordinated operation. And we were working day and night. What we would do was bring in, for 12 hours each, we had 160 firefighters working. Police had so many, I don't remember. And my problem was the fire department, making sure they were properly garbed, properly masked. Now, when we started with the cloth masks, and then we went to the 3M masks, that's when I found out the filters are different on different masks. We must have bought every one in the United States, and they started making them as quick as they could. And that saved a lot of lives also. But once again, they're cumbersome. A learning point from that for the New York City Fire Department is we had the 4.5-inch Scott air cylinders. One mask, one tank, sat on the apparatus. You worked, you left, the next guy came in, nothing changed. There was a mask, there was a face piece. We didn't have, you can't work in this climate, in this environment with an air tank on your back. You don't need the air tank, you need something to filter the air. So subsequently, every firefighter now gets a custom fit mask that when he goes on duty, he plugs that into the Scott, and if need be, we'll go to respirator mode, unscrew the Scott and screw in a respirator. So every firefighter now has the option of being able to function in a hazardous material area without a Scott, but with a breathing type device. So this just wanted to show you the detail of what went on with this thing. And we had, this is interesting because I think the Army engineers brought in these two houses. I don't know where they got them from. One was West Command Post, one was East. There were houses. We set up secretaries in them, accounting systems in it, and then one day they announced, we're taking them, we need them. Next thing they disappeared. They went to Afghanistan too, apparently. This was just a list of who was working that day, who was in charge. This is the operations. These are the state assistants. I don't mean to breeze through them too quickly, but you do this stuff. This is what you've been studying here, so I don't mean to. So let me just show you. Every morning, the police helicopter went up and we had a photographer on it taking pictures, infrared pictures, that we could try to figure out where the thermal plume was traveling. We were worried about certain tanks being underground, being exposed to things. Every night we plotted this thing, trying to figure out where the plume was going. It wasn't always that 100% accurate. Like this is showing it crossing a major street. That never happened. But we had tanks, we had underground tanks here we were worried about this stuff getting to. And we would try to plot the next day where we were going to concentrate our hose streams and firefighting activities. Because every night I had to go to a safety meeting and be hammered by everybody and their cousin why was there still smoke there. The fire department should get rid of the smoke. And my response was, we do fire, not smoke. That's another operation. So what happened was they brought in a California movie team with blue trucks. In fact, the Air Force flew them in on C-141s. Blue water trucks that sprayed everything. This kept spraying everything. That was something we couldn't do. We didn't have spray water trucks. We had fire trucks. This is an interesting thing, sort of reaching the end of our discussion here, is that we were trying to figure out where we might look for remains, what would be the best option. So what you see here, we had a team with the GPS gizmo, and don't forget, it's restricted here. Everything's blocked by tall buildings around. You can't get 2-3 good readings from GPS satellites here. But what those are plots of, some are bodies, the red ones are tools, blue are bodies, I believe. But what we're trying to find out, well, here's some tools from squad so-and-so. Well, they're over here. Maybe we should start looking here for some more body. You know, although we kept up a good front saying we're looking for survivors, there were no survivors. You didn't have to be a genius to look around and look at the debris here to realize surviving was not going to be an option. But we were hoping to find the remains of people. One of the things I still don't go to wakes or funerals too much anymore because at that point, whenever I could squeeze in, if the funeral or wake was in Manhattan or nearby, I'd go to 1 or 2 quick wakes. And that can wear you out very quickly. And we had funerals without bodies. Then they found something, and we have another funeral, the same person with a body. In the beginning, the Catholic Church wouldn't allow a funeral without a body. Then they relented because you couldn't find any bodies anymore. So that was an attempt to do something. it could be perfected so much better now with our GPS capabilities. I mean, you can walk out now with a Garmin and find out exactly where you are. And this was happening right behind me as I was arriving at the scene there. First I say, what are these guys thinking, Iwo Jima here or something? And then I got to think of it a little bit better. And they did publish, this is that day, the 343 fire department victims. And these guys, God bless them, they didn't take a dime from their portraits are on stamps and everything else, and they never took a dime of it. And that's it. I would be open to questions or opinions or anything like that there. Yes, sir.
Hey, sir, how many units did you say that were lost that day?
How many what?
How many units? How many trucks?
Fine. We had 91 apparatus lost and 130 damaged. So we were getting apparatus from all over the place. Manufacturers were sending us stuff. Volunteer departments were sending it. They had a truck on order. They gave it to us. Some volunteer departments were actually filling in on Staten Island. They're actually filling in dangerous operation. If you're running a professional operation and someone volunteers, closely supervise, because what happens is that the volleys love to fight fires and they're good, but they're operating under a different scheme of things than you perhaps would operate under. We had several cases, the poor guys got trapped in buildings and stuff, and meaning very well, it's just that was not their training, that was not what they were trained for. These are a couple of pictures. I was clearing out a camera, which I had in my pocket that day, took a couple of pictures and never used again for a long time. Standing on the ferry boat going across, that's what we were looking at. Next picture. Next picture. So this is what the ferry boat captain is trying to figure out. The first tower has come down. He can't find his slip. His slip is, this is Governor's Island, by the way. There's a ferry, and the Coast Guard was conducting this major evacuation. They billed themselves as the largest seaborne evacuation since Dunkirk, and which was true. They just sent an all-boat bulletin. Everyone come to behind the World Trade Centers, and they just hauled everybody across to New Jersey. That probably was the last ferry leaving there. They were loaded. Our ferry eventually came in. It's interesting, you come in and people are clapping for you, and you haven't a clue what you're going to do. You really don't. But you try to give a good stiff off the lip. Oh, I hit it now. Okay, so this is just some of the scenes there. Well, this is yours truly. This is that West Street where we were setting up the original command post. Some of the apparatus is still sitting there, trying to figure out what to do with that. That's the bridge. They had a bridge across the street, 2 different locations. That was the northern one, and there was one down by where I was on West Street. You could walk, pedestrians could walk across. How that bridge survived, I have no idea, but we had to finally physically knock it down. There's a look at us just taking it down. This is, that's actually ladder 113 up there. You can see the job, the engines survive better than the trucks because the trucks try to always get close to buildings and engines are trying to look for hydrants, so they survive a little bit better. Could you hit it again? I'm missing some. Oh, this is a blurry picture, but I just wanted to point this out. That's the chief medical officer, Dr. Kelly. That's Dr. Prasant, who was the lung specialist. That's Chief Crothers, who started off as the incident commander. That's Pete Hayden, who inherited the incident command and became chief of department. This was our IT guy. I have no idea what his name was, but every time I needed IT help, he showed up. So. It's a blurry picture, but it's just for history. It's there. This is probably more personal than anything, but that's me. That's Peter. That's my son Dan. That's my brother, the major in the Air Force. That's my dad. He was 80 some years old, and he's wandering around that pile I was at this day one. I have allergies, I apologize. But he wanted to know, when he was a captain, he retired as a battalion chief. When he was a captain, he was the captain of ladder 20. He wanted to know where was ladder 20. And you just look, there it was. And they lost everybody. Then, of course, I figured you had to see, I had to get dressed up one day. People were donating things here and there. I don't know what these folks are donating. They look like some fire apparatus manufacturers. They probably dumped a rig in the front and giving me the keys here. One day, a tractor trailer of pumpkins arrived. I have no idea how it got through security. The police supposedly had all the pumpkins. What was I going to do with a tractor trailer full of pumpkins? It was October. So, being the genius that I am, we put a couple of people on phones, and the first school principal that answered the phone got a tractor trailer delivered to his friend. This is interesting for you science-type people. There was an outfit from Pennsylvania that had been fighting coal fires forever, and they wanted to sell us the additive to water that made it less viscous so it would soak into the ground and attack coal fires. So we paid them a few $1,000s to come bring this stuff in, and we tried it. Because we couldn't really put anything out until we started. Everything had to be dug out to extinguish it. The water just wasn't getting into where we want. That stuff that was in the air, that formed this massive paste that was just became non-porous. I mean, I couldn't make concrete that good, but this stuff was forming up. That's how we dispensed it. That's the drug, they thought we should buy thousands of gallons of this stuff, and it really, at that point, we were digging. That's what it looked like. It wasn't really foam, it was a less viscous version of water is what it was. Just wanted to show you some of the steel girders and stuff that are bent and laying all over. There we are trying to still, the big thing is, I'll relate this to you. When I'm standing there that night, as sun's coming down, I'm running out of steam. I was home, I had surgery on my back, I had a rotten cold, but I was there, and another wounded deputy chief showed up. He came limping in. I'm your relief. I said, here's one radio. I'm going back to the division in Staten Island. I'll get some more radios. And then there was a fellow from construction company. He says, Chief, you want some lighting here tonight? I said, yeah. He said, I'll light it up like Yankee Stadium. Just sign this right here. And I did. I think they hunted me for months trying to find out who signed for this stuff. But we literally lit up. They brought in because there was construction going on all around there. So they had those lights, those massive light units. And he did light it up like Yankee Stadium. I have to salute him. And eventually it got paid, but they hunted me forever on that one. But this is some of the daily stuff we faced every day. That's the end of up here. That's where, obviously, that's where it ends, and it goes around, and it comes around here. But I'm giving you the view from my side. There were things going on. You'll see pictures. I'm sure there are photos of the fires on the other side. They had water, and they had tower ladders going, trying to extinguish the things. This is some of the junk that was just, where do you go? What do you do with this stuff? I mean, it's like, I think that's it. That's the end of our, yes, sir.
Sorry, I just wanted to follow up. In light of the 90-plus apparatus and trucks FDNY lost, how many months before you guys were back at 100% readiness, if you will?
The fire powers that be will tell you we were at full strength that night, but we started putting units back in service. We have a certain amount of spare apparatus, for when apparatus breaks down, stuff we keep at the Division of Training and things like that we can bring out. That was put together. There were volunteer outfits giving us trucks. Once again, the biggest, one of the biggest problems is communication. Those trucks don't talk on our frequencies. We don't talk on their frequencies. Their handy-talkies don't operate on our frequencies. So you got to make sure you put someone on there. So we're used to operating under strength. We don't have to operate at 100% strength. We've dealt with many fifth alarms going on in the city over time that went on a couple of days, and we were able to operate like that. We relocate companies, et cetera, and try to keep it spread out. Were we at 100% strength? No, but it's amazing the amount of fires that cut down. People seem to be much more cautious, I guess is the word I want to use.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So looking at Dave, not only the enormous loss of life and apparatus, but there's also an enormous loss of experience in the department. How did FDNY approach that in the following months and try to grow back? You can't grow a 10-year crew chief, a 10-year operator.
That's correct. There was a massive promotions, fireman to lieutenant, lieutenant to captain, captain to battalion chiefs. The good thing is, once you start getting through the fireman's ranks, you've got a lot of experience. You've got some experience anyway. But we were making lieutenants with, just a few years on the job, captains with a few years on the job. Battalion chiefs, they were in a little better state. And deputy chiefs, they had been battalion chiefs for a while. And I stayed around for another year and a half, just rebuilding my division. So we rebuilt it, a lot of new experience, a lot of new ideas. And it was difficult, it really was. But after 9/11, everybody was very concerned about everybody else, so we tried to do the best we could. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
With a big incident like that, and you guys seen what you guys saw, what follow-ups did you guys do checking on the crew? So capacity of your crew, your team, seeing bodies? Talking
about PTSD, basically.
Yes.
So that became a big item. And what they started the very next year, well, we always had yearly physicals for firefighters. On-duty firefighter, they would be sent to the medical office, which was in Brooklyn at the time, and they would be given a physical. And the first group of physicals after 9/11 also considered psychological evaluation. And if the person doing the examination felt more help was needed, they were referred immediately to, and some people sought it quietly. There were splinter groups that dealt with it without having to make a big deal about it. They would just go to it. I'll relate this to, maybe just add a little bit of humor to it, I guess. I went in for the physical, and they said, oh, the medical section is backed up a little bit. Sit over here, we'll do the blood pressure first, and then we'll, okay. So they put me on a chair, and the chair collapses. They said, your blood pressure's a little high. Then they start, did you know anybody that got killed on 9/11? I said, it's the fire department. You either know the person, the uncle, the grandfather, the father. Oh, blood pressure's a little high. But that was the extent of my, but yes, they offered the service. They were persistent about it, almost to the point of being annoying. I say that probably in a good way. And there were, I learned later, much later, people I didn't even know were getting help. But particularly the first two units that saw all these people jumping out of windows and stuff like that. And really, they didn't even see that. Most of them were in the building. It's just a few people that were arriving outside. And then the trauma of, we never really found whole bodies. You found parts of bodies. You found a helmet. You found an arm. You found this. You found that. So that's a good question. It's an important part of everything the fire department does now. And whenever there's a major operation or a death or something, they're pretty much into that. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I'll be around all day. Thank you.